Alright, it's filming.
I don't have, so.
All right.
I'm like, okay.
It's filming. Try and get his voice.
All right, ready?
Okay, do I need to do anything? Just
Nope.
okay, just as long as I hold the thing facing the.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay. All right, so
Welcome Chris Kampka, our proud man from Comcast Sportsnet, who's going to do his presentation on the Rockford Four Cities. Thank you, Chris.
Oops.
well, first of all, I must say that there's a lot of great resources out there that without them, I wouldn't be able to have done this. There's a lot of great books by Peter Morris, his Saber Project, or Bio Project articles that cover a lot of these players. There's also a great 3-volume set by David Nemick, Major League Baseball profiles from the 19th century. They're fantastic. There's a 55 article series that ran in the 1922 Rockford Republic. There's so many great things that I had to do this. It was a fascinating topic. The 1871 Four Cities of Rockford National Association, the first professional season of Major League Baseball, at least as far as I'm concerned. I know there's a bit of a dispute, but I fully consider it a major league due to the stars that were in the league. Anyway, in the history of Major League Baseball dating back to 1871, the state of Illinois has been represented by 2 cities, Chicago and Rockford. Rockford was first settled around 1834-35, about 90 miles from Chicago and about halfway between Chicago and Galena. The original settlers came from Galena. The area was briefly known as Midway. It was incorporated as a village in 1839 and chartered as a city in 1852. At the height of the Four City Baseball Club in the late 1860s through 1871, the population was around 11,000. In many places, there was a big boom in baseball after the Civil War. Rockford was no exception. In 1865, the Rockford Forest City Club was organized, one of several to appear on the scene at that time. Hiram Waldo was in charge of the team. He was born in New York State in 1827, came to Rockford in 1846. He was a teacher, a 2-term county superintendent of education, and a clerk in the post office, among many other things. He was also a longtime bookstore owner, for which he is probably best known in the Rockford area. Waldo had a great eye for talent. In late 1865, a 15-year-old from the Pioneer Club dominated another prominent Rockford team, the Mercantiles. Well, actually the Mercantiles' second team, by a score of 26-2. About a month later, Waldo pitted his Forest City Club against the pick 9 selected by Waldo himself, including that 15-year-old pitcher. The Forest Cities pounded the pick 9 31-19, but Waldo was impressed with the youngster and added him to the roster for 1866. His name was Albert Goodwill Spaulding. Spaulding grew up in Rockford after moving there from nearby Byron in his early teens. In fact, the house that in Byron he was born in still stands, though it looks terribly different. He was still around a month and change shy of his 17th birthday when July 1867 rolled around, and the Nationals of Washington were on their Great Western Tour. Byron also has a great selection of Spaulding memorabilia in their town.
You mentioned Byron.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
The Washington team was a fast-rising amateur collection of fine talent lured to the team with cushy government positions. They were led by George Wright of baseball's famed Wright brothers. As a tune-up for the Excelsiors of Chicago, they faced the Forest City team at Dexter Park, July 25th, and they lost 29-23. It was the first win by a Western team over a powerhouse from the East. Well, after this tune-up, the Excelsiors expected a cakewalk against the Nationals team that was beaten by a bunch of hayseeds, including a 16-year-old on the mound from Rockford. The Excelsiors were destroyed 49-4. The Forest City team was now on the map. They also had Ross Barnes, born in New York but grew up in Rockford, who made his Forest City debut in September 1866 after teaming with Spaulding on the Pioneer Club. Entering the 1871 season, Rockford had chalked up wins against the Chicago Excelsior and even the legendary Cincinnati Red Stockings, among others. Forest Cities, in fact, during that 1869 undefeated run by Cincinnati, they lost 4 games, all of them to Cincinnati. The organization of the National Association for 1871, March 17, 1871, delegates from 10 clubs met at Collier's Rooms in Manhattan, one of which was Hiram Waldo of the Rockford Forest City Club. Unfortunately, the Rockford team would be drastically different entering the 1871 season, for winning against powerhouse teams comes at a price. Harry Wright, impressed with the Forest City team, plucked Spalding, Barnes, and Fred Cohn from Waldo's team for his Boston entry in the new league. Undeterred, Waldo got to work finding new talent. March 24th, 1871 Chicago Tribune referenced the players lost Spalding, Cohn, Barnes, Simmons, Joe Simmons, who ended up playing for Chicago in 1871, Hastings, Scott Hastings, who left for New Orleans, remember that name, and Doyle, Joseph Doyle, who was the Forest City first baseman in 1870 but did not play in the NA. Also listed there were those who expected to be with the club. Bob Addy, Robert Matthews. Bobby Matthews, a 5'5" right-hander, of course, ended up with the Kakiangas of Fort Wayne and pitched a 2-0 shutout over Cleveland in the first game in National Association history, May 4th, 1871. Tom Corey, John Lennon, well, actually William Lennon, was a misprint. Peter Hoskins, Samuel Sayer, Ballard Osborne, J.J. Ryan, and Mack, last year with the Keystones of Philadelphia. Of that list, only 3 would play with Rockford in 1871. First is Bob Addy. After a game against the Clipper Club of Rochelle, Waldo offered Addy, a tinsmith, a job at a hardware store if he would come to Rockford and play for the Forest City Club. He was described by a writer as big-hearted, bow-legged, profane Bob Addy. Cap Anson said he was not sort of a genius and quit the game because he thought he could do better at something else. Many sources tab him as being born in Rochester, New York, but subsequent research has revealed
How do you know when it stops recording? When the red light goes off?
and was most likely the first Canadian-born major leaguer. As of April 8th, Addy was the present captain of the Nine, an original Forest City player, he wasn't, and in his position, as well as at the bat, equal to the best. Bob is 30 years old and weighs 155 pounds. That coming from the newspaper prior to the season. Spalding said in his 1911 book, as early as 1866 at a game in Rochelle, Illinois, Bob Addy startled the players of the Forest Cities by a diving slide for second base. None of us had ever witnessed the play before, though it may have been in vogue. Certainly, we were quite nonplussed, and just as surely the slogan, "Slide, Kelly, slide," had been not heard at the time. Kelly was 8 years old. The other 2 were Sayer, they got the name wrong, and Mack, whose name they barely knew. Mack was Denny Mack. He was born Dennis McGee, named after his father, a former Civil War captain. He changed his name to protect his identity from his father after he left Villanova, studying for the priesthood, to play baseball. Mack played primarily first base for Rockford. Sayer was Samuel Pony Sager. He appeared in 8 games for the Forest Cities. Sager was discovered when the Forest Cities played a game at Marshalltown, Iowa, as was Hoskins. Sager recommended a teammate, 18-year-old Adrian Anson. Anson, later to be nicknamed Cap, among other things. In his early years, he was referred to as Baby Anson or the Marshalltown Infant. He's said to be the first white person born in Marshalltown, Iowa. The town's name comes from Marshall, Michigan, where Henry Anson, Adrian's father, once lived. In fact, Adrian Constantine Anson was named after 2 towns in Michigan. Henry founded Central Iowa Town. The Anson influence is still seen in Marshalltown. Anson Park, Anson Elementary School, and Anson Street still are there. A statue of Henry Anson stands in front of the Marshall County Courthouse. Adrian and Henry, as well as Adrian's brother Sturgis, all played on the Marshalltown team. Cap Anson quoted his father in his book, A Ball Player's Career in 1900. They wrote to Marshalltown and tried to secure the whole Anson family, and Adrian, who was still only a boy, was allowed to sign with them. I, retaining his older brother at home to aid me in my business. The April 5th Chicago Tribune, listening to team members, made it a point to note that catcher Anson was 6 feet 7 inches tall. He wasn't. He was most likely 6'2", although some accounts differ. Many exhibitions were mixed in, and I will focus on primarily the championship games, according to Retro Sheet. It's all a jumble. It's pretty difficult, but we'll get through it. Or we're going to talk about the Forest City Club of Rockland, according to the New York Clipper. So this is a look at, from the Byron Museum, at some of the period uniforms. The one on the right is the old Forest City one.
Oh, awesome.
It's a replica. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
an
but I
original.
mean, still, I've seen it described, I haven't actually, seen it. That is
Now the
cool.
trim looks blue, but I am led to believe that the trim was in fact green. They are referred to frequently as the green stockings in newspaper accounts. Game 1, the regular
Chris,
season.
where was that museum? Which one?
Byron.
That was Byron. So how far is Byron from Rockford?
About 15-20 minutes
Okay,
south.
it's on the
Yeah.
trip.
Southwest.
It's on the trip. Make a note. He has to. Make
It's
a
worth
note.
it, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Spalding House is there, the museum is there.
Okay.
It's a very dinky town, but I mean, that's
Oh, that's
notable.
awesome.
There's also supposedly a stone that says birthplace of Spalding, but I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Game 1.
Is there a
of the-
museum in Marshall?
No, not that I've seen. But there's a lot of stuff there. I make it a point to go there just to see what was there. So May 6, 1871, the first game of the quote-unquote regular season. Of course, their first game was against a team with the same name, the Cleveland Forest Cities. According to the Chicago Tribune, an effort was made near the close of last season to arrange a series of games for the exclusive possession of the name, but nothing came of it. For the New York Clipper. The match between the Forest City Club of Rockford, Illinois and Cleveland, O, played at Rockford May 6th, is not only null and void by reason of a violation of the rules, but both clubs, by their action, ran the risk of expulsion from the professional association. The Rockford Club presented Scott Hastings in their 9, though owing to his having played in the Lone Star 9 of New Orleans on April 16th, he cannot legally play in any other club until June 16th. This violation of the rule against revolving the Forest City Club of Cleveland permitted, instead of objected to, as they should have done. The umpire was equally in fault in countenancing the violation of the rule. The rule in question was a mandatory 60-day period between appearances of two different teams, which was to prohibit players from going from team to team. Some sources listed the mandatory waiting period as 90 days. This was the National Association. Nobody really knew the rules anyway. Of course, since Rockford lost the game 12-4, it wouldn't have been treated any differently as a forfeit loss. As for the details of the game itself, Rockford professional baseball got off to a rocky start as they coughed up 6 unearned runs at the top of the first. If you notice at the top of this box score, not any of the 16 runs in the game were earned. Leading off for Cleveland was James Deacon White, who would later be inducted in the Hall of Fame 142 years later. Also in the Cleveland lineup, Ezra Sutton, who 2 days later would hit the first and second home runs in National Association history. In any event, they tacked on another run at the top to make it 7-0 before Rockford's first run was scored on a Cap Anson double, scoring Ralph Ham, who reached on a misfielded pop-up by pitcher Al Pratt, Al Pratt was nicknamed the 5-inning wonder because he was only known for going a couple innings before getting tired, something that's well known today. Both teams scored a pair of runs in the fifth to make it 9-3. Rockford added a run in the seventh on an error, pass ball, and wild pitch. Cleveland topped their total off with 3 in the top of the ninth and told the 4 would stay. All 16 unearned, the 1870s baseball. Umpiring was J.H. Manning of the Rockford Forest City Club. He didn't have the greatest of days. To finish the seventh inning, quote, Matt went out on strikes, though it took 5 of them to do it, owing to the inattention of the umpire, said Chicago Tribune. And later in the remarks section, the game was a relatively long one comparatively, though pretty well played on both sides. The umpiring was of the same order as that which has often troubled games in the West. Mr. Manning was undoubtedly fair-minded, but he could not have read the rules of this year. For instance, the first half was some 20 minutes in playing when the time should not have been more than 10 had properly been called. And then they directed their disgust towards Rockford pitcher Cherokee Fisher. The most disgraceful feature of the game was the persistent shouting and annoyance which proceeded from Cherokee Fisher. The Rockford manager should learn that the custom, which has been abandoned by Athletics and Nationals, is entirely out of place in the West. 19-year-old Anson made his major league debut in this game at catcher. According to Anson in his 1900 autobiography, he was pressed into catching duty because Scott Hastings was late to arrive to the game. Anson went on to start the second game behind the plate too, but Hastings relieved him after 2 innings. Which is curious. The Rockford Register, in addition to the Chicago Tribune, listed him as a catcher. In the April 8th team intro piece in the Tribune, no, this is the Register, Mr. A.C. Anson of Marshalltown, Iowa, who, though but 18 years of age, weighs 185 pounds, and certainly for pluck and nerve can safely be pronounced the number 1. He is a good batter and runner, and has that Western endurance that will enable him to hold Fisher's hot shot if anyone can. Anson primarily played third base the rest of the season. In the second game, Rockford outscored the Olympics of Washington 15-12, the Forest City bunch sweating out a 5-run ninth by the visitors. On what the New York Clipper says, on Wednesday, May 17th, the Olympics arrived at Rockford to play the first game of the championship series with the Forest Cities, but taking exception to the latter club playing Hastings, would not play a match game under any circumstances with Hastings in it. Our correspondent sends details, but as we are pressed for room, they are omitted. This is a common theme in the early games, discrepancy over Scott Hastings in the games. Eventually, what would happen is the ruling would be made, and every win with Hastings would be considered a loss. Therefore, the Forest City started their season 0-16.
Was that only until May?
Yes, that was until that 2-month period was over. The Rockford Gazette referred to the Washington team as the Cincinnati Washington Olympic Combination baseball club, featured 4 members of the legendary 1869 Red Stockings. Fred Waterman, Asa Brainerd, their ace, Andy Leonard, who was the answer to the trivia question, who played the most games in National Association history, and Charlie Sweezy, who did not play in this game. Their shortstop for Washington was Davey Forrest, who indirectly had a hand in the ultimate demise of the National Association. The game was umpired by Chicago's highly respected captain Jimmy Wood, whose career ended after the 1873 season because an accidental knife wound which became infected and caused his leg to be amputated. For the third championship match of the season, played May 22nd, in Chicago, Rockford went down by a score of 15-6 to the White Stockings. Tribune once again mentioned Hastings. Some commentary in that period newspaper. A sharp tip from Fisher's bat in the third inning threatened to ruin catcher Charlie Hodes. Good looks, at least for a time. It hit him full in the mouth and extracted the tooth with more rapidity than elegance. Hastings demonstrated that the hurt did not disable the catcher by trying to steal second immediately after being beautifully nipped by Hodes to Wood. On Rockford, the newspaper noted, the new 9 seems to be fortunate in the possession of an excellent third baseman, Anson, who will make Pinkham look to his laurels before the season is through. Concerning the rest of the 9 is charity not to be inquisitive. Their score of 21 errors tells the story. As for the Rockford Gazette, the large number of our citizens were in the city and witnessed the game. All agree that the game was very unfairly umpired, and that had our boys received fair play, a different score would have been the result.
Did you find out, like, if the sports writer for the Rockford paper was related to Hawk Allison at all? Yeah, like a distant relative, you know?
Very possible.
Might have been Harrelson in his youth.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so moving on. May 24th, in Cleveland was notable for the first of 3 Rockford home runs of the season. The first coming off the bat of Cherokee Fisher in the 9th inning to tie the score. Cleveland won 11-10 with a run in its half of the 9th. May 26th, in Troy. Troy was late to show up when they hosted the Forest Cities, the New York Clipper says. The Rockford Nine put in an appearance on the Union grounds at the advertised time for the game, but owing to the non-arrival of the Haymakers, who had been detained by the getting ground of the steamer Connecticut, play was not called until 10 minutes before 4 o'clock. A few notables in the Detroit lineup were second baseman Lipman Pike, very likely the first Jewish major leaguer, also holds the career National Association home run record with 16. Third baseman Esteban Steve Bayon, the first Cuban-born major leaguer. Also catcher Bill Craver, who would eventually be banned from the majors for his part in the 1877 Louisville Braves game-fixing scandal. Clipper adds, Fisher late of the Haymakers pitched for the Rockford club and did much better than he did last year, while on the Niner, the former club, but it was not good enough. Rockford lost 20-15. The Clipper said, it proved to be a long and would have been uninteresting one, but the good batting of both nines. The errors in the field were quite numerous on both sides. The visitors somewhat excelling and muffing. Next, the Forest City Club visited Boston for the first time and lost a pair of games. Familiar faces were in the Red Stocking lineup. Ross Barnes playing short, batting second, Fred Cohen playing left, batting eighth, and Al Spaulding pitching, batting ninth. Newspaper accounts occasionally refer to the Red Stockings as the Boston, Rockford, Cincinnati Nine. Not only did manager Harry Wright bring over 3 former Rockford players, he also brought in his brother George, Cal McVeigh as catcher, Charlie Gould first base from the old Cincinnati Red Stockings, who went undefeated in 1869. Boston won the first game 25-11. The first home run of the season allowed by Rockford was by none other than Al Spaulding. Cherokee Fisher gave way to Denny Mack in the 7th inning on the mound, the first non-complete game of the season for Rockford. Mack would be the only other man to pitch for Rockford in 1871. There weren't many pitching changes in 1871 National Association Baseball. In fact, there were a grand total of 23 relief appearances all season long. Harry Wright did 9 of them himself. June 1st, 7-3 loss to New York People. When the four cities visited New York on June 1st, Tony Sager was absent. The Rockford Gazette said he was somewhat injured. Having played the first 5 games to shorten the next 3 left, Sager never appeared in another regular season game. In his place was Al Barker, making his lone National Association appearance in the championship game. He had served as substitute in other games, but this is the only one he appeared in the regular season. Barker was the only member of the 1871 team from the original 1865 squad. It was Barker who, after the 1857 upset of the Nationals, he was captain at the time, was said to have proudly worn his uniform in public for the next 2 days. He was 1 for 4 with a walk and 2 RBI in his lone game, one of 11 players in Major League history to have multiple RBI in a one-game career. Thank you to the Baseball Reference Play Index for that. After his baseball career ended following the 1871 season, the Civil War veteran went on to a lengthy career as a dancing school teacher, band member, he played the tuba, and a member of a quartet. He even umpired 3 National League games, all 3 Boston and Chicago in May of 1881. 2 RBI by Al Barker aside, Rockford lost anyway. From the New York Clipper, the game recap. Martin of the Eckfords' umpire and displayed excellent judgment in his decisions, but also showed a lamentable ignorance of the new rules in one respect, considering that he is the captain of a professional nine, for he enforced the defunct rule of giving warning to the pitcher before calling balls and to the batsman before calling strikings. His repeated calls of ball to the bat and good ball, creating laughter as such calls have not been heard since 1869. This is also the debut of Dick Higham, later infamous for being the only man to be banned from being an umpire in 1882, despite murky details as to why. Notables in the mutual lineup: Dickie Pierce, often given credit for the baby hit or bunt. Joe Start, great first baseman, career dates back to the mid-1860s, played well into his 40s, was King Kelly's favorite player growing up. He should be honored at Cooperstown, in my opinion. And Bob Ferguson played second. Modern fans may have read about him as having the spectacular nickname Death Defying Things. According to David Nemec's phenomenal Major League Baseball profiles, he was rarely called that during his day. Instead, the preferred moniker of the time was Have a Care, his vocal signal that something was afoot when coaching the bases in his captaincy. So the next game was an 11-10 loss, even though they scored more runs than their opponent, without Tony Sager, and the team were seemingly reluctant to use Al Barker regularly. Charles Chick Fulmer made his Rockford debut, as taking over at shortstop. Bob Addy filled in his previous 3 games. Fulmer was from Philadelphia and attempted to serve as a drummer boy during the Civil War before he was sent home when it was discovered he was only 14, according to Bio Project by Peter Morris. He played with the Keystones of Philadelphia and 4 cities of Cleveland before arriving in Rockford. Notables of Philadelphia: Dick McBride, probably one of the 5 best pitching careers in National Association history. Second baseman Al Reach, one of the first professionals, if not the, later a sporting goods magnate, eventually merged with Spalding and Company. Third baseman Levi Meyerly. According to Nemec, Meyerly simply could hit a baseball better, farther, and more often than any other player of his day. He tied with Troy's Lippman Pike and Chicago's Fred Tracy for 1871 National League home run lead with 4. He was also a legal fielder. Rockford broke a 7-7 tie in the 9th to take a 11-7 lead. Philly then rallied for runs to make it 11-10, but that's where the game stayed. According to the game account, Meyerly made a couple of bad throws that gave the 4 cities 7 runs. He also homered, typical Meyerly. June 16th was a notable date for the Rockford team, and it had to do with the dispute over the participation of Hastings. Remember, he played for Lone Star team in New Orleans as recent as April 16th, so he couldn't play until here. In July 8th, New York Clipper, a judgment of the Judiciary Committee was printed declaring all games forfeit. Newspaper accounts will continue to show uncertainty as to what counted and what didn't. Hastings, a Civil War veteran, despite only 5 months of service in 1864, is listed in many sources as 4 city manager. What is strange about this is the fact that contemporary newspaper coverage rarely ever made reference to it. I would actually consider that Bob Addy may have really been the true field captain of this team. However, Hastings is referred to as captain once in all newspaper accounts I could find, that being September 30th. Referred to as Captain Hastings. Anyway, June 24th was their first legitimate championship game with the Hastings 60-day ban over. Chicago, the Rockford visited Chicago following 18-8 allowing 6 runs to both the 5th and 7th. New York Clippers sang a familiar tune. On the 4 cities, it was a loose and discreditable game, so loose to excite wonderment at their successes over the Athletics. The 9 is far from equal to that of 1870 and needs strengthening in the infield. There were several exhibitions mixed in, often listed in newspapers to list of scores. There weren't many accounts and box scores printed, but I will note that in a pair of exhibitions on back-to-back dates in June, Rockford routed the team from Kansas June 27th by a 71-0 score, then rocked the Kaw Valley 9 67-11. They also played a few games in Canada at the beginning of July. A 13-12 win over the Maple Leaf Club of Guelph, the champions of Canada, according to New York Clipper, on July 1st. They later beat a Maple City team from Ogdensburg, New York, 78-0 in August. Also noted was this: Sager, the left field of the Rockford club, he actually played short mostly, fell violently ill and could not play, but his absence did not affect the result. This coming from one of the exhibitions. He disappears everywhere. It's possible he could have been demoted to a role as a substitute, I'm not sure. But the man nicknamed Pony as well as Cricket. The Bio Project by R.J. Lesh and Peter Morris is fascinating, as it is more about the quest to track him down than it is about the man himself. The next season contest was in July 4th in Chicago against the White Sox. Clipper reported a crowd of 10,000. 4 cities staged a late comeback, and it was too little too late. The second Rockford home run of the season came in that 8-run ninth. It came off the bat of Gat Stiers. Garrett Stiers is one of the heaviest hitters of pre-National Association baseball, as well as 1871. Rockford discovered him playing for the Byron Nine. He joined the Rockford team in 1868, but missed the 1869 season with typhoid malarial fever. Perhaps with him, Rockford could have beaten the undefeated Red Stockings in 1869. Stiers was back in action for 1870 in the lone Rockford season in the National Association. In his 55-part series on the teams that ran in 1922, Horace Bucher referred to the Stiers as the Babe Ruth of early ball. In his book, But Didn't We Have Fun?, Peter Morris quotes a writer as saying, And every rustic stereotype ever invented was shoehorned into a description of the early ball player, Adoniram, I don't know where that name came from, Gat Stiers, who became known as the Terrible Hayseed. Stiers was the phenomenon of those days. He knew nothing of headwork, but he had the strength of a giant. The places under the arms where the shoulders join the body are usually hollow. In Stiers' case, they were filled with muscles. The man could run like a deer and had hands like hams covered in hide. No fly passed him, and his fielding record was generally errorless, save in the matter of throwing. When he returned the ball to the diamond, it was always at lightning speed, and no one could tell whether the spear would reach the catcher or go far over the fairground fence. But it was at the bat that Stiers won his name as the Terrible Hayseed. He was not like Anson or Barnes, a sure base hitter, but when his club did meet the ball, the result was nearly always a home run. More from the Morris book. Harry Wright, according to the recollections of one of his contemporaries, once waded across his creek and climbed the bluff to retrieve a ball batted by the legendary slugger Gat Stiers. Stiers was only 22 at the end of October 1871, but that was all for his major league career. He went west, mining gold in Colorado, surveying land in South Dakota and Minnesota, farming and hunting in northwestern Iowa. It was said that he was present for the last Sundance ever performed by the Sioux at the Pine Ridge Reservation. When he returned to Byron, he wore his hair long in the frontier fashion. Stiers died in Oregon, Illinois in 1933 at age 83. In any event, back to 1871. Rockford fell to 0-16 with those 4 forfeited wins on July 17th when they hosted Philadelphia. During a Rockford 4-run first, Stiers also made a terrific 3-base hit, the ball bounding back off a tree in center field and preventing a clean home run. Rockford played the majority of its home games at the site of the Agricultural Society, where the Winnebago County Fair was held. The site remains a park today. Named Fairgrounds Park, when coming across references to these ball grounds, you encounter ridiculousness. Here are a few examples from Phil Lowry's Green Cathedrals. Most interesting and strangest major league ballpark in history. Numerous trees behind the catcher and along both foul lines made catch and foul pop-ups impossible. Third base was up on a hill. Home plate was in the deep depression, so that when tagging up from third to home, a runner was running downhill the whole way. All the way around the outfield, there was this first warning track ever. It was a deep gutter providing drainage from the adjacent quarter-mile horse racing track. Horace Bucher provided this comment to the Rockford Republic in 1922. Even in my juvenile days, that fairground diamond had more hazards than any respectable golf course. A Rockford resident named John Clifford gave a description to the fairgrounds to the Rockford Register in 1939. The games were played on the fairgrounds, and the poorer field, to my mind, has never been known. The catcher was hemmed in by trees with the exception of a space about 30 by 50 feet. An umpire could not see a foul unless he hit the back of a plate or a few feet on either side of the baselines. Between the plate and second base, the terrain was fairly level, but approaching third base, there was a noticeable rise, and from third to the plate, there was a depression, and the base runner had to dig in for life. The bleachers, made of a planking from a torn-down bridge, seated between 300 and 500 people. The Tribune in 1870 wasn't quite as harsh a critic. The ground was nicely adapted for ball playing, barring a slight elevation in right field and numerous trees just outside the foul lines toward the first and third bases. Old Rockford finally broke into the win column officially with an 18-5 pounding of the New York Mutuals on July 31st. It was young Adrian Anson's first career 5-hit game. A.N. Nichols of Rockford was selected as umpire. Nichols, an insurance man, had served as Forest City's secretary and previously employed A.G. Spalding in his insurance office. You certainly won't find team secretaries filling in as umpires for their own games nowadays. Forest City 9 made it 2 in a row 3 days later in spectacular fashion. The game was scoreless until the 7th inning, when a wild throw by Matthews let Hastings score. Cherokee Fisher tossed a complete game 4-0 shutout. One of 4 shutouts in the entire NA that season, and Fort Wayne was involved in all 4. The Capiangas shut out Cleveland in the first game of the season, May 4th. Then they were shut out by Al Spalding of Boston, June 21st, by Randy Walters of New York on June 28th, and by Cherokee Fisher of Rockford on August 3rd. Cherokee William Fisher of Philadelphia, without a doubt, the swiftest pitcher in this country, and a gentleman who is well known as a very earnest and reliable player full of endurance and pluck, and a first-class batter, will attend to the pitching department. This is the intro prior to the season. Fisher also played for the Troy Haymakers 9. In fact, there was a notable game in 1869 where Troy tied Cincinnati and almost put a blemish on their perfect 1869 season. However, at the end, Captain Bill Craver and team president Keon pulled the team off the field due to a disputed play. Or was it? There were some whispers that there was gambling interests involved. William Rychek, in his excellent Blackguards and Red Stockings, said Fisher was a solid hurler and went sober and an all-around good player. He could fire the ball at the best of them. Did not have Spalding's control, strategic ability, or offensive support. At least on one occasion, Fisher would be released from a team, presumably from drinking. The Chicago Tribune, even in 1875, noted Fisher depends on more speed than strategy. Fisher's NA career spanned 5 seasons for 5 teams. Baltimore Canaries